this meeting, the Bloomington Commission on Sustainability. This is our May regular meeting, and today is Tuesday, May 9th, 2023, and it is 6:01 p.m. Will the secretary please call roll?
Matt Austin.
Here.
Caitlin. Matt Flaherty.
Here.
David.
Here.
Nigella. Nolan.
Here.
Emma.
Here.
John. Me, present. Justin. Alex.
Here. Nigella just walked in.
Yes.
Thank you. So today's agenda was distributed by email on Friday, May 5th. Are there any objections to adopting the agenda as distributed and shown on the current screen? Seeing none, the agenda is adopted. The minutes for the April, what meeting was that? April 11th meeting, regular meeting were included in the packet. Are there any corrections? Seeing none, the minutes are no objection. Are there any? Do we need to object? No. No corrections. The meetings are approved. Okay, we're gonna move on to public comment. Would anyone like to comment? No. Don?
I sent to your commission's website, or email address, a report on which may be of interest to both the Environmental Commission and the Sustainability Commission about providing a model of reducing landowners, homeowners, property taxes for environmental climate mitigation activities being proposed by a number of local government councils in the United Kingdom. I thought it would be something that might be a thought, considering the fact that cities give big tax cuts to lure manufacturers and businesses into their community. This seemed like perhaps an idea that would affect the smaller people of the community versus the large corporations. Just thought that would be something to think about.
So if like a homeowner did something like put up solar panels or were composting or something like that.
Yeah, or, cut down their invasive plants, et cetera, and plant native plants. It was kind of thought, gee, that's, the only problem is once the state legislature probably get wind of it, they'd make it illegal.
Right. So the idea would be to incentivize people to do the right thing without giving them a break on their property tax. That makes sense.
But then again, the city might then raise property tax.
To offset that.
Is the Ecological Commission, or is it Environmental Commission?
Yeah, environmental commission.
Is the Environmental Commission considering putting forward a proposal on this?
We haven't met yet since the article appeared.
But it's a model that like another city has taken.
Well, it's just a report in the Guardian
Okay.
about, does it specifically say what cities, but it is something to think about.
Yeah, if so, it would be something that I think at least the Just Transition Working Group might be interested in working, exploring or authoring.
Have you received that email?
I don't think I'm added to.
Okay, but that's
I
what
didn't
you
know
would
it
have
existed, so I'll have to ask about that.
So
Okay.
that kind of goes along in concert with the idea at the end it's working towards the Bloomington's Climate Action Plan, that if there's some sort of UDO issue, that should be swept under the rug or pushed aside, because what's more important, the UDO or the climate action plan? So, kind of a safe idea. We want people to work towards that more than we need people to abide by a stupid rule. You get it.
I have provided some great feedback. That's
Yes.
helpful. We're kind of
Yes,
engaging,
Yeah.
Please do.
back and forth on public comment. First, I agree. Climate action plan should drive what the UDO says, not vice versa, along with other guiding plans.
Much better way to put it.
But and by state statute, I mean, the comprehensive plan, those plans are meant to guide development code. I would put our transportation plan and climate action plan in the same boat. With respect to tax abatements specifically, the way they're structured in Indiana is probably not ideally suited for that. I haven't explored that particular application, though I did see the article you sent, so thank you. A year or two ago, I worked with council staff to look at site-specific tax abatements for individual property owners to incentivize getting landlords to accept housing choice vouchers, because that's a huge discrimination problem that we can't systematically overcome due to state preemption. So trying to induce landlords to accept housing choice vouchers given the supply constraints through minor tax abatements. But the way the tax abatement laws are structured, it's just really not suited to be able to do that. There's a few categories you can give an abatement for, and they're sort of limited. So I'm a little fuzzy on the details because it's been a while, but I remember when exploring that particular application, which is sort of similar in the sense of a sort of social purpose or good that we are trying to incentivize in some way, we couldn't really find a way to do it in the existing structure of tax abatement laws. That's not to say that there can be other incentive programs to induce like living lawns, and those sort of climate adaptation, pollinator, other benefits for folks, but it might have to take a different funding mechanism or programmatic approach than a tax abatement specifically. So I think the idea is a good one. I just wanted to share that background vis-a-vis tax abatements. If folks are really motivated about it, I can work with council staff to dig in more deeply specifically on that. Also, economic and sustainable development staff are the folks who work with the Economic Development Commission, which I also sit on for the council, that is actually charged with bringing tax abatements. So they would be the appropriate commission and department to engage if someone wanted to take that on as a particular mechanism. But I hope that's helpful.
Would it be able to be like a rebate program?
Yeah, I don't see why some other financial incentive couldn't be granted. Just a push and pull of what to spend programmatic climate action plan funds on. But I think the 1.7 million or so we have dedicated to climate action plan implementation is meant for programmatic purposes like that. But yeah, tax abatement might not be a viable avenue.
Awesome. Well, thank you for providing that context.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you for your comment. Okay, if there's no other public comment. Okay, report from acting chair, that's me. I would like the working groups to put together their 2023 year-end goals. So just maybe 2 or 3 goals that coincide with a climate action plan initiative, what you're working towards, something that we can tangibly measure or work on. And if you could bring those, I don't know if you're still, okay. Bring those to the next meeting, we'll put that together.
Just a question, so would that be the goals going forward? Or
Just
what
to
we've done in
the
past
end.
year?
No, just to the end of 2023, so what you'll work on. They could be like a really short goal, but if something you're gonna complete in the next like 6 months.
Great, yeah.
But just so we can have something to put in the annual report. Okay, and that's all I have. Instead of the
Well, I can tell you it feels pretty weird to be on this side now instead of that side, so this is new for me. So right now we have 2 vacancies, so it was my previous vacancy and I was appointed by Common Council, and then we also have a mayoral appointment that's available. Those 2 are posted on our website, so if you know anybody that's interested and wants to apply, the application is on the BCOS website. So I've been the Assistant Director of Sustainability for 3 weeks now, and I've started to dig into some programs One of them is the BCOS Neighborhood Grant Program, and I just wanted to provide a little more details. So far, it looks like the program's going to be set up where there's going to be $1,000 available for a neighborhood improvement grant. And so if a neighborhood wants to get together and they want to start a composting program, they need supplies, they need composting bins and materials for that, they can apply for a grant. And the way that that's going to work is there's going to be an online application process, and BCOS members will review the applications and approve them. So we're still working out the details on that, but I'm working with Housing and Neighborhood Development to get that program up and running.
Is it $1,000 per person max, or $1,000 to split around?
So it wouldn't be
Per
just
applicant or
a
neighborhood?
single individual, it would be
Yeah.
a group effort per neighborhood.
Do you know what the total budget might be? But I'm just trying to think of
Yeah,
how
sure.
many neighborhoods you might.
So for right now, we have 10 grants available for this budget year, and then also working on possible grants that if a BCOS working group wants to hire a consultant to, like for the compost captain program, if you want someone to help with a compost captain survey, neighborhood survey, and figure out which neighborhoods would be best to utilize for the compost captains program, we could work on something like that. So your proposals would need to be written and approved. But we want to make funds available for your projects.
And so this is coming from ESD?
Yeah. And I'll have more information about that as we work through the programs. So we're working on a climate risk and vulnerability assessment update. It was done 3 years ago. We're going to have a McKinney Climate Fellow that's going to begin here in a few weeks, and that's really exciting because the climate risk and vulnerability assessment that was done 3 years ago, it was more regional data. This time we're going to be using local data, and we're going to be working with frontline communities, and so getting their input. And we're going to have 2 workshops. There'll be one in July and one in October. And so that's really going to drive where we want to focus climate action plan initiatives. So that's really exciting. And then I was asked to include this in tonight's meeting. City of Bloomington's Planning and Transportation Department is launching a corridor study of College Avenue and Walnut Street. And there's a website that you can go to if you're interested in that. And so they're trying to revitalize those streets and make them more safe. And I would really like to see, as a sustainability professional, having those corridors be cool corridors. So where people are walking, that there's more trees installed and more protection for people who are walking along those corridors. So that's something I'll be working on. So if anybody has any questions, I can help to answer.
Actually, I do have a question. You can apply for the neighborhood grant program now, and
We're not there yet.
Okay.
But we do have an online application that's used in other departments in ESD, so we'll just be using that. So it's
Okay.
already set up, and it should be easy to add our grant program.
Okay, cool.
Yeah. So the BCOS members would be added as reviewers,
Mhm.
and so it'll be up to you what you want to fund.
Okay.
Mhm.
Okay, very cool.
Any other questions? Okay, thank you, Sean. Report from council ex officio.
Hey y'all. First, just apologies. I haven't been able to make the last few meetings. I had a couple of conflicts come up, and then had difficulties accessing electronically once. So I've been absent for a few months. I wanted to note and apologize for that. But yeah, I have a few updates to share. One was that we had a primary election on last week, which is also part of why I was so overwhelmed and busy this spring. But I hope you all voted for that and we've got some change coming. So as we already knew, we'll have a new mayor coming in 2024. Carrie Thompson won the Democratic primary nomination, and as elections go in Bloomington, the Democrats tend to fare well in the general, but of course we'll see who else is stepping into the arena. Likewise, only 4 of the current 9 council members will remain on council going into the next term. That's Dave Rollo, myself, Isabel Piedmont Smith, and Kate Rosenberger. So we're going to have a fair bit of change. My personal perspective is that on balance, the folks who got elected on the council side and mayoral both are positive developments for sustainability, and complement well the mission of this commission. Sierra Club, for instance, had endorsements out for the primary, and a variety of folks who were endorsed by Sierra Club, made it through. And more directly related to my service as an ex officio member on this commission, those are 2-year appointments, and I think I began at the beginning of a 2-year term for this one, so I'll be able to serve through the next year as well. A couple legislative updates and other things. One is that an ordinance developed by Councilmember Morallo last year to change the traffic calming and greenways program and policy for the city. You may recall me sharing out on that in late last year, those of you who were on the commission then. We tabled that back in early December because we had a very busy end of year schedule and didn't really have time to get to it. But that has now come back, renumbered as Ordinance 2308. So we had last week, Council introduced that, and I made a motion to refer it to the Bike Ped Safety Commission for review and a recommendation. It was referred to, or the council approved that unanimously. It went to the Bike Ped Safety Commission last night, and they unanimously voted to vote down the ordinance at the council. It involves basically changes about where and how council is involved. It would add council as kind of the last step in the process. I think Councilman Morallo in favor has felt the need for a council safeguard or ability to change something at the end of the process, whereas feedback on the other side has been that there's a risk of that politicizing the Greenways program and or a risk of sort of stranded costs from staff time and engineering study investments and other things like that that could sort of be for nothing if council overrode it at the end. For additional context, the council does approve Greenways, all traffic calming Greenways programs in at least 2 other instances previously. So one is in the transportation plan. All the Greenways are called for in there. The neighborhood-led traffic calming program is a little different. That's developed and brought forward by neighborhood, by residents in collaboration with their neighbors and needing a certain amount of signatures. And there's a defined process. We approved the process for some years ago. The second way is that we allocate money. So we appropriate funds previously to support implementation of the Greenways. So this would be inserting council at a different point. I'm happy to talk more about that if folks have questions about it or answer questions, but that's coming back to the council tomorrow night, potentially for a vote. I would say it's fairly related to our transportation sustainability goals, vis-a-vis supporting a network for non-automotive transportation in the city. So I think there's a nexus there that is the reason we wanted to share with the commission here. Second, I guess, same with the College and Walnut Corridor study. Like Sean mentioned, the goal that's called for in our transportation plan, along with 3rd and Atwater. These are 2 major north, south, east, west corridors we're looking to study and change in the coming years. And a lot of the goals have to do with supporting multimodal transportation, economic sustainability as well. Generally speaking, slower moving streets that are calmer, have more people, are more activated, are bidirectional. Support businesses better as well. So supporting that whole corridor for businesses. And I think Sean made a really good point about the potential for increased canopy cover and other climate resilience sort of benefits too. So just would encourage you all to keep an eye on that process and engage with it as commissioners. I think that'd be terrific. And then finally, I wanted to share that a newly formed committee this year of the council is called the Special Committee on Council Processes. I chair that committee, and we were occupied early in the year with some questions around what constitutes removal for cause of a commissioner based on a whole other thing I won't get into. But we finally gotten our work underway in earnest. We were able to find some times that all 4 commissioners all 4 committee members can meet. That committee is made up of myself, Sue Scambolari, Dave Rollo, and Isabel Piedmont Smith. We're trying to tackle a variety of process-related things, including Bloomington Municipal Code Title II, which kind of governs all commissions, boards, and council processes. We're looking at more formally integrating racial and social equity into our legislative process, and also looking at overhauling and retooling some of the ways we do public engagement, in particular recognizing that there are plenty of demographics that are underserved in our community that we don't hear from on a regular basis with the existing structures for public comment and ways to engage with council. So we're looking to build on training we had in the last year or 2 around DEI and other community efforts that have been ongoing to really pilot and develop some, follow some best practices from other communities that are working to have a more inclusive and equitable public engagement. And the final thing related to that committee's work, it's really more than we can possibly get through this year, I'm sure it will extend into next year, is board and commission reform. So as some of you all may recall, Mayor Hamilton's administration about 2 years ago, initiated a process with the Novak Consulting Group to assess the city's boards and commissions and make recommendations with respect to efficiency and administration. There is a report that was a little hard to find. I'll find it and get a link distributed so folks can have that handy. But it was like a 38-page report. They interviewed council members, clerk staff who helps administer the boards and commissions, interviewed a wide variety of board and commissioners and chairs of commissions, and had about 10 key recommendations in their executive summary. One of those was to combine BCOS and the Environmental Commission. So there's been some discussion around that for years, and also in this commission recently vis-a-vis that report. When that report was delivered to council early last year, there were no efforts to change anything at that time. It's sort of been on pause. I sort of, absent the council doing something about it, I sort of expected a completed proposal to come from the mayor's administration at some point, but that hasn't happened. We've now started a committee to work on this and to bring in folks in the administration, bring in commissioners, clerk staff, members of the public to weigh in on some of these recommendations. We had our kickoff meeting to kind of plan our annual workflow Thursday last week, and we're prioritizing this board and commission reform as something we'd really like to get done this year to set up the new administration, a new council term, and all that with kind of the changes implemented, I guess. So that covers a wide range of things. We're kind of still getting organized around the things we're trying to tackle. Certainly looking at that Novak report as something of a starting point is something we're going to be doing. So we will certainly be looking at all 10 of those recommendations from that report. But we've got other operational and goal-oriented things we're going to be looking at with commissions and boards as well. So I just want to kind of tee that up for y'all to make you aware that things are moving on it again. It will hopefully be collaborative, not just with the council, clerk's office, and the mayor's office, but also with, again, boards and commissions and members of the public. We'll probably develop some forms and surveys for folks to weigh in and provide feedback. And I would imagine engaging members of BCOS and the Environmental Commission specifically with related to that recommendation that would directly affect the two commissions about the pros and cons of either approach. So that will probably be coming in the coming months. But if folks have questions, I'm happy to answer them now, or just keep an eye out, I guess, as we move forward. I'll keep you all apprised of our progress on that.
Can you say the name of the committee one more time?
Special Committee on Council Processes.
Thank you.
So a special committee, as opposed to a standing committee, is temporary in nature. We're sort of taking on a certain scope of work and would dissolve potentially when that work is accomplished.
Task force.
Yeah, similar. Yeah, exactly.
And one more clarification, with the corridor study, which streets were you talking about in addition to College and Walnut?
So College and Walnut are the study that's kicked off and is underway. I kind of mentioned in passing that Atwater and 3rd Street as the other major corridor, crosstown corridor, is also called for a study, but I think they're phasing the studies because it's simply far too much to take on both at once. So yeah, just College and Walnut to start.
What metrics are they using for the reviewing the efficiencies of combining committees?
The boards and commissions?
Yeah.
I don't know if they called out specific metrics. I would imagine staff hours was heavy on their mind. One bit of feedback we heard from some council members and from members of the public when we got that report was that sort of the questions that the Novak Consulting Group was answering were inherent in the request for proposals and the work set up by the mayor's administration and are sort of meeting a certain framework or goals, answering certain questions, not necessarily questions that were sourced by the public or by the council or the clerk's office. So I think everything in the report, that's a really important foundational question. Like what ends are we trying to reach, right? And so I know staff efficiency and efficient administration of government time and funds was part of it. We've also heard some feedback that that's overemphasized as compared to other values that public involvement brings. So I'll leave to you all to make your own conclusions. But I haven't reread the report in detail myself, yet, and need to keep exactly that in mind. Like, how are we measuring these things? What are the goals that we're trying to accomplish with any changes? And so we're trying to, on the committee, take a goal-oriented approach to guide our work on it.
Was there any discussion about formulating a sustainable, sort of like the climate action plan, but for sustainable goals? Because we have the CAP, but we don't really have one specifically for sustainable development.
We have the Sustainability Action Plan as well, which was precedes the Climate Action Plan. It doesn't map to the UN Sustainable Development Goals, which I know this commission has expressed some interest in. It maps more so to the same categories as the CAP, and precedes it by about 5 years. And it's probably a little less detailed and specific, fewer total actions, I think. But no, that's probably not directly in the purview of this committee, but probably more so in like the work purviews of sustainability staff and or the commissions with respect to making the case for something different or something to augment what we have now.
Okay. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Any other questions for Matt? Okay. We're gonna move on to reports from commissioners and our working groups. We'll start with just transition.
Okay, yeah, I have updates on 4 projects that we've been exploring and doing community outreach on in Just Transition. The first is one we're recommending because action, which is coming up later on the agenda. The second is where we do not recommend action, and this last 2 we're still exploring. So the first one is the fossil fuel non-proliferation. I really have trouble with that word, sorry. Treaty. That I've mentioned a couple times in past meetings, and the working group has done outreach with ESD and the mayor's office. Well, ESD, we haven't heard back from the mayor's office, just that they said they're interested in getting the mayor's response back to us before because votes on it next month. I'm hoping we could vote on it next month. And so, yeah, we're going to discuss it later, so I won't take up the time to describe it right now. The next one that we're not suggesting action is fare-free transit. So this is an idea that's been, batted around and discussed, as you might imagine, before in Bloomington in previous years. And our working group was wondering what were the current obstacles. So we did some initial outreach with Bloomington Transit, and we have uncovered what we feel are serious enough structural obstacles to our not support fare-free transit at this time. Particularly the city's growing crises of homelessness and people with untreated mental illness requires our transit drivers to exert their judgment and care to respond to the needs of marginalized people whose needs such as shelter from the heat and cold, safe places to sleep, access to mental health care, et cetera, are not being met by other city agencies, so they ride the bus. So for this reason, we do not plan to move forward at this time with any recommendation for because on this issue, because going fare-free at this moment, it actually seemed that there wasn't a lot of economic obstacles, by the way, but it was mostly this. So we thought that going fare-free without having alternative systems in place to meet these people's needs may actually overwhelm the transit service's ability to respond to these people in responsible ways. So we're not recommending action on that. Any questions before I move on to the next 2? Okay. The next one is Community Land Trust. We met with Nathan Ferreira from Bloomington Housing Authority, who is heading the Community Land Trust back in March. And we found out about a lot of the great work that they're doing currently to increase affordable housing stock in Bloomington in ways that will improve our city's wider sustainability goals. So we have developed some ideas on how BCAUS might help guide the future work of the Community Land Trust to help bring about a more just transition to renewable energy. And we're hoping to meet with Council Member Flaherty on this topic to learn what other city initiatives may already exist in other levels or agencies of the city, and to see where BCAWS might be able to lend our expertise in this area. Any discussion or questions on that?
Do you recall the name of the community land trust that's getting set up under Bloomington Housing Authority? Is it done through the Summit Hill Community Development Corporation, which is
That's
the
a good question.
501c3?
I don't. I mean, I just I know that's the main initiative that's getting funded, but no, I don't know what the name of it is.
The Bloomington Summit Hill Community Land Trust.
Yes, that would be it. Yeah, thank
Is that
you.
the name?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Oh, did you pull that up somewhere?
Yeah, I had it in my notes from last.
Then that sounds correct. Yeah, I
Oh.
thought it was under the Summit Hill
Yeah.
Community
Oh, yeah, I
Development
had it
Corporation,
from-
but I
okay.
wasn't sure.
Well, that makes sense
Caitlin
because
talked about it last meeting.
that makes sense that it's called that because we kept asking like, well, are you doing this? Are you going to do that? Are you going to fund these other types of projects? Because this is a very limited, single family house, which I mean, it's very, very much needed, right? But it's a very narrow scope what the current land trust is. And so we kept asking like, have you thought of this and that? And his answer was, well, we're hoping this will be implemented well, and then we could expand into other areas. And so we're just really interested in kind of learning who else is working in that area right now in the city, doing our outreach with them, and making sure we're adding value in the most appropriate way to that conversation.
Yeah, Caitlin talked about maybe doing a presentation during a meeting about what they're doing and what it all means for sustainability and stuff. So I think that would be beneficial for us to hear about also. Cool.
Yeah. And the very last thing is just the topic of unhoused data tracking, which we've mentioned before. We found out from initial outreach that unhoused mortality rates specifically are not officially tracked by the city. I mean, most of the data around unhoused people is not officially tracked by the city. It is tracked by other agencies who service unhoused people in our city, such as Beacon, maybe HealthNet, I would imagine, has their data. And so the Just Transition Working Group is exploring how we might be able to help get that tracked by the city. And also heading home of United Way, they're making progress and also doing this same type of work to gather, find out where this data is. And so we feel our city would be making a tremendous step forward in addressing the problem of homelessness by simply tracking it deliberately and in a transparent manner. And we're developing these ideas in collaboration with relevant agencies and organizations. So we would hope to propose BCAWS action on this item in the future. That's it.
Wonderful. Anyone have any questions for Najla? Okay. Sean?
Well, I've talked to Hannah and Nolan about this. Because I'm in this position, I think it's going to be too confusing to continue to have the heat management task force and starting initiatives with BCAWS and then also with the city. And also because we're updating our climate risk and vulnerability assessment, part of that is going to be looking at extreme heat, and we're going to be creating a task force. And so I don't want to burn people out by asking them to be on the heat management task force and also be on the task force for the CRVA. So we've decided to dissolve the heat management task force. So we're not going to totally give up on extreme heat initiatives.
Transition.
We're transitioning. So we're going to finish the CRVA by the end of this year. And then I've started talking to Dr. Dana Habib, and we're working on getting a Beat the Heat program started for next spring. And so we can start a Beat the Heat task force that's led by my department. So it'll be the same people. They'll be invited to be involved with that and also with the CRVA. So we're not completely going away. We're just going to be in a different form.
Is Bloomington Transit on your list of people you're reaching out with on that topic?
I met with someone at Bloomington Transit. I can't remember his name right now. but we did talk about bus stops, and he was going to provide a list of bus stops in Bloomington, and we want to take a look at which ones are provide shelter and which ones don't. And so they definitely are on our radar.
I suggest that you also ask to speak to someone who can speak to the problem they have of destination list writers. That's one thing that they voiced to us when we discussed the fare free, is that they already are kind of overwhelmed with people who are, just trying to stay cool or get warm or have a safe place to sleep. And so you may want to, they see BT is somehow like one of the frontline places that are addressing the needs of this population. And so we want to make sure that anything that was done would expand the options for people, and, hopefully help relieve some of the burden that's being placed on Bloomington Transit at this time.
Those are good ideas. We'll take those into consideration.
Thank you.
Are there any objections to dissolving the e-management task force?
Seeing none.
Some kudos for your initial efforts in getting that set up and working to advance that. I think it's terrific. So I'm looking forward to it being folded into other work.
Thank you.
And yeah, just to add, we've talked about this too, the county is also taking part in the Climate McKinney Fellow and Resilience Cohort. And so yeah, that work you've done creating that task force already, I think will help both our efforts, and hopefully we can collaborate with the city too to get that going. So
Putting that on people's radar and knowing that it's such an important topic for us to be working on here. So.
All right, thanks, Sean. Okay, waste management.
All right, so plenty of stuff to talk about. First, if everybody's not aware, unfortunately, the local food waste experts are shutting down. So if you're not aware, Earth Keepers at the end of this month is closing. We've already had multiple, we being the urban farm that I work with, have had multiple friends and neighbors say, what are we going to do with our food waste? So we're developing a program called Compost Captains, which the idea is that there are already people in the neighborhood, and we spoke about this before, in every neighborhood in America that are already composting. And the idea would be, instead of that food waste going outside of the neighborhood, it stays in the neighborhood, and we have compost captains sign up saying, I can accept 1, 2, 3, 5 other neighbors' food waste. So there's education involved, so on and so forth. But this seems like with Earth Keepers shutting down, unfortunately, this is the perfect time to push harder on that to get that up and running sooner, because there is now a void left, and there are hundreds, if not maybe 1,000 families, I don't know how many customers Earth Keepers had, that are looking for this service. So I'm going to be emailing Earth Keepers, because they have all these buckets, and that was going to be one of the costs to starting up this program, to see if we can, if they can donate the buckets, or if we could potentially buy them with whatever money we can figure out to offset some of those initial startup costs for a program like Compost Captains, because the majority of the operating or the startup costs are going to be buckets and maybe some website development. So we have, our goal is to have a pilot started near the end of the year. We'd like to get 2 or 3 neighborhoods on that, but now it seems like we need to accelerate that and push faster and harder to get that up in the next 2 or 3 months, because there is a need, because there's nobody, unfortunately, that is providing that service any longer. So with that part being said, the next, one of the things that we were working on that got shut down but is now reopened was we were looking to find a way to reduce the amount of waste that's going into the landfill, and the lowest hanging fruit would be wax covered milk cartons. Okay, and after doing some research and talking to Republic does not recycle those. Well, if you guys aren't aware, there's a new transfer station with Rumpke opening up on May 17th. On the 16th a week from today, I think, they are having an open house from 11 to 2. I encourage you all to go. I will be there. I think Emma and Joseph, Winia will also be there. Sean will be there. So after talking with the Rumpke fellas, they did let me know that they do recycle wax-covered milk cartons. The majority of the waste actually comes from schools and little milk cartons, but there's plenty of residents in Bloomington that consume nut milk, seed milks, and those are all wax-based milk cartons. So that's some low-hanging fruit that we can really get to. I haven't confirmed this with Republic, but the Rumpke guys did say that Republic accepts glass, but they do not recycle it. It ends up going to the landfill. Now, there aren't a lot of citizens of Bloomington that probably are aware of that, and if they were aware of that, that would probably piss them off. So I encourage the council, and we need to figure out, how do we get rid of this? How do we switch? How do we get out of the contract with the Republic and sign up with Rumpke? Because if we do have this goal of reducing 25-30% landfill by 2030, it's not going to happen with Republic. No way, shape, or form is it going to happen with Republic, because the glass and the wax-covered milk cartons. The guys at Rumpke have also invited us, whenever we want, we can go to Cincinnati to see their 2-block long machine that is a single stream machine that separates everything through density, and it's really, really cool is what I'm told. So that would give us some insight, besides seeing the transfer station, what happens there, to also see what happens when it is taken away from the transfer station. So we have more insight and more knowledge about that. So I don't know how that would happen. I've heard that the contract with Republic is actually, there's some sort of NDA signed where they're not allowed, nobody's even allowed to talk about the contract. I don't know if that's true or not, but I say these things to find out whether it is or not. And then I know we've spoken about the Citizens Academy. There are the application is currently open for that. I just signed up yesterday. And so I encourage everybody, if you have the time, to look at the application, to sign up for it, so you can have more in-depth knowledge about what is going on within the different departments of the city. What did I miss?
You did a very good job. That was most of everything.
Okay, and we are always looking for someone else or multiple people to join the waste management working group. Well, actually, I should say, do you think it's okay to talk about what Joseph's doing?
Sure.
So Joseph, he left the commission because he thought he could have a bigger impact, and so he is waiting on a response he submitted an RFP, and the program he's designing is he already has one apartment community signed up, and he's going to be developing a food waste composting system in that apartment community that stays there, including education, where it will be self-run by them, and with the idea of expanding it. He has 2 or 3 other communities that are interested in it, because as some of you may or may not know, all the apartment complexes around the city, they don't recycle. They don't do anything with their food waste, because the apartment complex has to manage that, and they obviously don't want to do that. So that's another area where there's a large opportunity to reduce waste, to be more sustainable, if we can figure out the path of least resistance and the most duplicatable system for these complexes to reduce, or to start recycling and reduce food waste. So I'm very, very excited to see what Joseph does.
Yeah.
Questions?
What steps have you taken so far to explore the Republic, the Republic contract issue with respect to how long it is, or anything?
I have not done anything with that yet. I just
We've put together a list of questions.
No.
He has a contact with at Rumpke who's willing to answer any and all questions that he can. He's going to work to answer them, and so we've put together a list of questions, both about Rumpke and about Republic, to try and get answered that can help us.
And he said he would go through the public records to find what the contract is, so on and so forth. You know, if there's a cancellation
Yeah.
clause.
Like repercussions,
Mhm.
stuff about the contract.
But for me, it's a no-brainer, even if it costs the city some money to do that. We have a certain fund towards sustainability, and this seems, I mean, if it is true, I 100% know, because I've gone through the Carton Council and done my due diligence on cartons, that Republic does not recycle.
Mhm.
The Carton Council is a national council that deals with all that stuff. But I haven't confirmed with Republic they don't recycle glass. It's from the Rumpke guys saying that.
Sure.
So, yeah.
To the extent that you can get, the companies themselves to answer questions, that's great. But then, of course, there's the question of the city contract with
Right.
Republic and what that looks like and what the terms are. I know costs have been shifting over the last few years, and the recycling has gotten, this is just reflective of the broader
Right.
trends nationally, right? It's gotten more and more expensive and requiring more public subsidy to manage and more difficult to get things recycled. The conversation would be likely for city legal and public works.
Mhm.
Public works administers our city sanitation.
Yep.
I'm happy to help at least get the conversation started
Please.
and figure out what there is that that we can know or not and why
Right.
not. But if you could maybe just reach out to me with like a summary of like what and like where the data is from, and if you all get more information directly from various recycling service providers, that's great too. But yeah, I can definitely help advance the conversation with the appropriate channels of the city.
So something you said in there that I think will benefit the conversation that I didn't realize. The gentleman from Rumpke specifically said that they don't make money on the recycling.
Right.
They actually lose money.
Right.
But the reason that Rumpke, for example, will do glass, will do all these other things, is because the value of keeping that out of the landfill is more valuable than making money on the recycling. Because as we know, landfill is, if this is your property, that's all you can do. But then how high can you go? The air rights. And so by keeping the cartons, keeping the glass, keeping all this stuff out of the landfill, that's actually more valuable to them than making money on the recycling. Because the cost of building a new landfill, so if they can get 5-10 more years out of it, that is way more valuable than making money on the recycling. For me, that was kind of like, right? Right? You're like, that makes sense, but I never thought about it that way.
Yeah.
And so for me, that was kind of a revelation. And so that helped me understand why Rumpke would be doing it, but doesn't help me understand why Republic isn't.
Yeah.
So.
Great, thank you. Does the Monroe County Solid Waste District engage in the recycling space as well? I'm not really super familiar, like offhand. Joseph's been involved in their advisory.
I wish Joseph was here.
Yeah.
He could answer all those questions. I mean, I'm only familiar with their drop-off sites.
Okay.
And I have no clue who they contract with.
Yeah.
The idea was to get the city first and then move out to all these others, encouraging them to do the same.
Okay, yeah, if you want to maybe come in, Councilmember Piedmont Smith as well, when you reach out. She's our ex officio seat on the board, I guess, of the Monroe County Solid Waste District. And she's also sort of passionate about this too. Could probably help provide insight from that perspective. So if we're like pursuing and looking at this, it makes sense probably to do so in a broader community context.
Yes.
Maybe at the same time. So that's great. Thank you.
I've been waiting for you to come back.
Good. Okay, thanks, Matt. Just on a working group page, so we chose these working groups just at our personal passions, right? Like Matt's obviously very passionate about waste management, as am I, and so that's why we formed that working group. And it's also based on what the Bloomington Climate Action Plan, the goals are. So there's 2 waste management goals. One is increase landfill solid waste diversion and educate, motivate public to achieve waste reduction, blah, blah, blah. And so there's other, there's health and safety, there's energy and environment, there's land use, there's green space. And so one way to get more involved is to take some of these goals and figure out how to put together a working group to try and achieve these goals. Just for some context. Also, we heard from Justin today. He's not here, but he's interested in starting a working group. Sorry, let me find his email. He's going to talk more about it, but a new working group on strategic engagement and outreach. So to support the mission of BCOS through collaborative relationships with outside groups and educational outreach to the public. Dave, I assume you would be on that as well. So if anyone's interested in that, you can reach out to Justin, but he'll talk more about it next meeting. Super excited about that starting as well. So we'll move on to discussions, not resolutions. So the fossil fuel non-proliferation. Is that
Yeah.
not said?
Yeah.
Go for it.
Okay, thanks. So this is an initiative that the Just Transition Working Group has been exploring for a while. It seems to fall right into the BCAUS's mission as well as the Just Transition's mission, because the Just Transition is a major part of the proposed treaty. So the Fossil Fuel Non-Proliferation Treaty is a proposed, not an existing treaty. So treaties govern international agreements. So nations, when they sign or endorse a treaty, they're obligated to basically enforce the treaties in their own domestic laws. That's what. So it's not an existing treaty; it's a proposal. It's already been signed by several nations, as well as 6 nation states have supported the proposal for a fossil fuel treaty. 8 cities, around I think 9. It was last I checked in the U.S. So Bloomington could be the 10th. 101 Nobel laureates, 2,000 civil society organizations, 3,000 scientists and academics, and 600,000 individuals have endorsed and called on governments. And so the fossil fuel treaty calls for a supply side approach to fossil fuel use. So rather than, a demand side approach would be, what we were doing a lot of, which is also needed, which is trying to, build out the infrastructure and encourage people to use less fossil fuels. Supply side would actually address the extraction and processing of fossil fuels in order to get national governments to agree to draw down to where we need to be climate-wise. And so we just did some initial outreach with ESD, who says it does align with the city's broad economic sustainability goals. And so we drafted this. It's mostly based off the template, but anyway, it's also customized for Bloomington. And I don't know if, I guess what I think the best process might be is to kind of maybe quickly read the more important parts of these, and then I have a letter after. So this is the resolution that we're asking that we would be asking the city or the mayor's office to endorse. And because then there's a separate letter that goes with it where because is asking the mayor to endorse this resolution. Okay, so anyway, I haven't been able to meet with the city attorney yet, but hopefully I guess they said after we discuss it in this meeting, then he could talk to me about it. But anyway, that's the general idea. And so anyway, I think if we can do an initial reading, and then if anyone has questions or feedback, I especially would like to get feedback on the sections that are specific to Bloomington. So you'll see when those come up. I know I could probably really, our working group could definitely use some help on the wording of those, making those more specific to our community. But any kind of feedback is welcome. And I think for the sake of time, we could do some feedback, but probably a lot of the detailed feedback I could take over email in the next month before the next meeting to try to get it into a final draft where we could actually vote on it, hopefully. So I'll just go ahead and do a quick read through. The resolution is affirming the city of Bloomington's ongoing commitment to the goals of the Paris Climate Agreement and endorsement of the Fossil Fuel Non-Proliferation Treaty. Oh, I said it right that time. Whereas the scientific consensus is clear that human activities are primarily responsible for accelerating global climate change and that the climate crisis now represents one of the preeminent threats to global civilization. And whereas the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change reported in 2018 that we must achieve net zero in greenhouse gas emissions by the middle of this century in order to have a reasonable chance of limiting global warming to 1.5 degrees Celsius. And I'm going to kind of just summarize some of these just for time. The IPCC released its 6th assessment form, where it's noting that the rise in weather and climate extremes has led to irreversible impacts such as natural, health, and human systems that are pushed beyond their ability to adapt. They called the working group, the UN has called their working group to report an atlas of human suffering. According to current commitment, global emissions are set to increase almost 14%. It will destroy any chance of keeping 1.5 alive. Coal and other fossil fuels are choking humanity. And then this is a specific Bloomington one, whereas changes in Bloomington's climate are already being felt with hotter, drier summers, with higher levels of ozone and other air pollution, warmer and wetter winters and springs with increased risk of flooding. And I just did some really quick research, but I'm sure many people in here know much better than I do, maybe how to improve that paragraph a bit to be more accurate and specific. Whereas our entire community is impacted by the health and safety risks of fossil fuel expansion, particularly those who also face socioeconomic and health inequities, including low-income families, unhoused people, people of color and indigenous people, youth, seniors, those experiencing mental and physical disabilities, and people with health conditions. I think that was mentioned twice, anyway. Whereas our youth and future generations have the most to lose from a lack of immediate action to stop fossil fuel expansion. Whereas the Paris Climate Agreement is silent on coal, oil, and gas, an omission with respect to the supply and production of fossil fuels that needs to be collectively addressed by other means. Whereas global governments and the fossil fuel industry are currently planning to produce more than double the amount of coal, oil, and gas by 2030 that can be burned if the world is to limit warming to 1.5 C and avert catastrophic climate disruption. Whereas the construction of new fossil fuel infrastructure and expanded reliance on fossil fuels exposes communities to untenable risks to public health and safety. Whereas the economic opportunities presented by clean energy transition far outweigh the opportunities presented by an economy supported by expanded fossil fuel use and extraction. Whereas our community is committed as part of our climate emergency response. We could even say climate action plan there, if you think that might be a better change. As part of our climate action plan to adjust energy transition into ambitious investments in the green infrastructure and industries that will create jobs and rapidly decarbonize our economy. Almost done. Whereas the city of Bloomington recognizes that it is the urgent responsibility and moral obligation of wealthy fossil fuel producers to lead in putting an end to fossil fuel development and to manage the decline of existing production. Whereas a new global initiative is underway calling for a fossil fuel non-proliferation treaty that would end new fossil fuel exploration and expansion, phase out existing production in line with the global commitment to limit warming to 1.5 Celsius, and accelerate equitable transition plans. Now therefore be it resolved, the city of Bloomington formally endorses the call for a fossil fuel non-proliferation treaty. And I'm not totally sure if it would be the city of Bloomington or the mayor's office or the common council or whatnot. So that's one of my questions I'm hoping to find out from the city attorney when he takes a look at it. Be it further resolved that the city of Bloomington affirms its ongoing commitment to the goals of the Paris Climate Agreement, greenhouse gas reduction targets, and pledges to meet its proportionate greenhouse gas reductions under the Paris Climate Agreement, which Bloomington has done in the Climate Action Plan. So, okay, any feedback or questions on that initially before I go to the letter?
Just a quick question for this. Are we going into this with the idea that Bloomington, if they do endorse it, they're going to have to do their own non-proliferation of fossil fuels? Like, production here in Bloomington needs to be.
Well, that's actually one thing that our working group was concerned and didn't know about and thought we should find out when we started this outreach. And so that was sort of my question to ESD. I actually don't know if we extract or produce or process any fossil fuels here, and I don't even know. But according to ESD, this is broadly in line with the city's economic sustainable development. Was the one sentence answer, but of course they want it to be. They want this to be kind of in the final wording before they take an actual legal look at it, just because lawyers are expensive, and they don't want to use their time until we're done,
Right.
with the wording and stuff like that.
I was just wondering because if Bloomington, if we do endorse this and do use it as like an action for us,
Yeah.
there's so many things not included in here, like futurization of our current fossil fuel technology, as well as regulations on companies and organizations utilizing fossil fuels.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know if that aligns with the treaty itself, which something.
Yeah, well, again, that's more of a demand side issue, right? Controlling the use of fossil fuels, whereas this is very specifically coming at it from the other side of the economy, the supply side. And it's really focusing on the producers, extractors, and processors.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah. Just from what I know about it. Okay. Any other questions before I read the letter, Matt?
So have you gotten clarity on whether or not any fossil fuels are extracted or otherwise refined?
I did not get a clear answer to that.
Okay. Gotcha. I think my initial thinking.
I did ask the question.
Yeah, I like the desire to make it more specific to Bloomington where possible. I just from my perspective, when the council sort of weighs in on things like trade with Cuba or like international issues like we sort of do from time to time, president-led initiatives, or supporting the Protect Workers' Right to Organize Act, the PRO Act some years ago. My orientation is always to try to figure out how to actually move the needle here in Bloomington and use that as an opportunity. So with the PRO Act, for instance, I worked with the chamber and BEDC to try to get them to support it as well, thinking they might have more weight and or could encourage their members to support workers' right to organize, and they declined to do so, but we invited them to, and tried to work in that way. So thinking in a similar vein here, I mean, my question from the council perspective would just sort of be I don't think there will be any objection to supporting the sentiment. The question is, what impact can we have, sort of, and is there something more we can do with it locally? And it's a little tough on the supply side, maybe, if we don't have any control over, the production of fossil fuels, or supporting them, or in any direct way apart from, demand side uses. The few things that popped to mind were, one, the city's efforts to potentially develop an anaerobic digester at the Delma wastewater treatment plant that's still being scoped and studied, but that would divert a lot of fossil fuel generated electricity in a net zero way. And the other is I've been thinking increasingly about building electrification and basically getting fossil fuel use out of buildings. That's the more or less the roadmap for residential and commercial building decarbonization. And the idea of biogas or hydrogen is a replacement for natural gas at scale is a fantasy. and so trying to figure out how to encourage that in Bloomington as well, whether it's through, city operations, properties we own, programs and incentives for residents, or, things like that. So that's another area that maybe to you, this is my question, does it fall outside the purview, since that too is sort of, again, directly displacing fossil fuel use for heating, space heating and water heating in buildings, but doesn't have to do with the production of fossil fuels.
I mean,
so
it
much
does
as their
have to do
use.
with the production in the sense that, of course, even the demand side of the economy has to do with the supply side, right? But yes, more specifically, what you're saying is like, yeah, before we, hopefully not before, but if we're going to expect fossil fuel producers to responsibly draw down their production of fossil fuels, then we need to have alternative methods of energy, as well as creating the local infrastructure that would support that, which is the electrification initiative. So yeah, I see that being pretty possibly something we could and I want to read more about the treaty and make sure, but it's kind of a good question. Where do you draw the line? Where does the supply side become the demand side? So, because I know that's kind of the top level view of the treaty is that it's supply side. Since it's basically focusing on the structure, it's saying, we can moralize and ask people to drive Priuses all day, but if the fossil fuel producers keep drawing the stuff out of the ground and selling it and using it, it's not, at the end of the day, we need a supply side answer to this problem.
What's the incentive for them to do this?
Well, an international treaty would be actually using the power of the state in order to direct that action.
To the profound resistance of the companies themselves.
So there's no incentive for them to.
No, yeah, there's no
incentive.
that's
They
the
have to
problem.
be forced. It's kind of like
That's the
with
problem,
renewable
yeah.
energy.
There's no good incentive for fossil fuel producers to stop producing fossil fuel.
Stopping subsidizing the heck out of it will
Right.
help. So that's been a major effort, is to stop the fossil fuel subsidies that are everywhere.
Yeah, that's a good point.
A
Stop
relation to
incentivizing.
solar was there were laws put into place that said there had to be a certain amount of renewable energy on the grid by a certain date. Otherwise, the producers of electricity would be fined. Now, would those fines be heavy enough for them to care? Probably not, but that essentially forced their hand to allow distributed generation onto the grid. Did they fight it? We've seen what happened in Indiana, and we've essentially had our hands cut off with that. So,
Are there any efforts to invite them to participate in green initiatives?
So this is actually a great question. And this is exactly where I was going next, which is that in my work, I work a little bit in the context of building decarb and thinking of like, what is the off ramp for gas companies in particular?
right.
And states and cities that are ahead of us on this are trying to figure that off ramp out and trying to have a managed dissolution of that business model. Because if you don't have a managed dissolution, you've got half your block or half your neighborhood is electrified, the other half's on gas. You've got fewer and fewer people paying for stranded infrastructure, essentially, in this sort of death spiral of rate increases. And ideally, the way to do it would be to do that in a managed way that cuts off, trunk lines a certain amount at a time. And part of what's been proposed in like New York State and New York City and other places is shifting like the gas providers to like a thermal utility and looking at things like networked geothermal, which can be more cost effective at scale and things like that. And I wonder about like, they might laugh us out of the room, but engaging with Centerpoint on topics like that, like that's like an interesting, like they have to know that they're in a precarious place and like they're probably interested in exploring, various models and methods for a viable business model for them in a regulated future. Obviously, they're also fighting regulation tooth and nail at the same time. But, still, I wonder if like broader engagement, like with utilities in a space like that, might be like actually directly engaging them, like might be viable in some way. They're still not ultimately the producers of gas exactly, but the suppliers of gas. And I don't know. So another thought.
I wonder if there's Like when they transitioned from candles to electricity, what was the kind of historic, I mean, where did that really start from? I know that it was they took out the gas lamps in the cities first. So the cities actually drove that change because risk of fire, constant maintenance, and people were resistant at first, but as soon as the downtown units pushed it out, then people adapted.
Mm-hmm.
But if there's a way to do that, but the problem is it's all on the grid now anyway. So
Mm-hmm.
if it's nobody cares where it's coming from,
Mm-hmm.
whether it's fossil fuels or solar plants. It's it would have to be driven from the top. That's interesting. That's to see what those approaches are.
So we've seen with coal power plants, especially very dirty ones, those were basically forced to shut down in the last decade and a half, and they've been replaced with either gas or solar or other things. And so that was kind of that happy medium. But then you still have all the workers that were working at those places, and how are they going to transition? And so that's always been a question. Everybody says retraining, but that doesn't always, if you look at retraining into other industries, the level of success with that is not very high. So these are questions that are very hard to answer. My philosophy is you just have to do it, and we deal with all the other repercussions. I mean, there's some of the worst polluting power plants in the entire country are in southern Indiana. Some of those counties have more than a 10% infant mortality rate, and the residents there, I'm not saying they don't care, but they care more about having their employment than the impacts of what their employment does negatively. And that goes back to the retraining. In rural areas, what are they going to be retrained into? Right? Because there aren't a lot of power plants outside of nuclear, right? There aren't a lot of coal power plants in largely densely populated areas. So it is a very challenging question to answer with all the different parties that are affected.
Of course, what drove most of the workers to coal mining was loss of jobs in the urban development anyway.
Right.
So they changed with the times. And, I mean, I don't think it's unreasonable to push them to do it again.
I completely agree.
So like to I think what we're all kind of getting at are like, what are the actual causal mechanisms that we have in Bloomington to affect change on this scale? And it seems like, it's the first couple ones are, maybe it's a bit pie in the sky, but we would be asking the city to endorse, and we would be asking the city to ask the state government and the national government to endorse a proposal for this treaty as well. But of course, there are all kinds of other causal mechanisms that we have to certainly align our city, with a treaty, with this treaty in a way where it's not just a symbolic, measure.
And isn't the city's already been doing that with the amount of solar they've
Sure.
installed
Yeah.
with the electrified
Yeah.
buses?
Oh, the climate action plan.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, this perfectly aligns with
Right.
it. Yeah. And so just a quick read through of the letter. Then, again, I'm not sure who the recipients are, but right now I'm going with the mayor. Dear Mayor Hamilton, the Commission on Sustainability urges you to join a global campaign for climate justice by championing a city endorsement of the call for a fossil fuel non-proliferation treaty. We're in a climate emergency. We need to accelerate a just transition away from fossil fuels, and cities are the essential element. As a home to the majority of humanity, cities dominate global energy consumption and emissions. At the same time, they face increased wildfires, flooding, heat waves, as well as budget crunches to adapt to these climate catastrophes. But cities are also at the vanguard of climate solutions, stopping fossil fuel projects, electrifying local grids, to your point, Matt, retrofitting, sorry, Council Member Flaherty, I'm sorry, I'm so rude, so disrespectful, electrifying local grids, retrofitting buildings, and dropping fossil fuel financing. Oh, yeah, so I mean, these are all things that we could explore more to possibly discuss. And I think our working group would be fine with slowing it down if we need another month or two to kind of explore some of these possibilities. While the city of Bloomington has already passed a climate action plan and pledged to reduce greenhouse gas emissions by 25% by 2030 and achieve carbon neutrality by 2050, the climate emergency demands more from us. Bloomington's increasingly hotter and wetter climate conditions are but a glimpse of the climate dangers that we face as Hoosiers. Without addressing the production of fossil fuels, we risk blowing through our climate targets. With recent reports, now is the time to put the question of managing an equitable transition away from fossil fuels on the international agenda. Support for the treaty is growing in global momentum. And then it lists what I already told you about the numbers of people who've signed it. The 3 pillars of action proposed are: 1, non-proliferation, preventing new coal, oil, and gas developments. 2, equitable phase out of existing fossil fuel production plans. 3, just transition so that no community, country, or worker is left behind. Can we count on your support to commit the city of Bloomington to a fossil fuel phase out and a just energy transition by endorsing the call for a fossil fuel non-proliferation treaty? If you have any questions, there's the person's contact who's the PR person at this treaty, which is apparently being led by Global Cities Campaign. Oh, that's the position, the Global Cities Campaign lead for the fossil fuel treaty, who can answer questions. They also have a great website, which is linked in the letter. So yeah, that's the read through of the letter. Any questions about it or comments? If anyone wants to give more detailed, comments or like work with our working group or join the working group, feel free to let me know after this as well. We're definitely happy to talk with anyone more to develop this for the next meeting.
Maybe this is just an ESL thing, but while the city of Bloomington has already passed, oh no, wrong one. Without addressing the production of fossil fuels, we risk blowing through our climate targets.
Mm-hmm.
Blowing through as in like exceeding, or what would be like another
far
way
exceeding.
Going past.
So,
like do it like
Is the
mi-
target
missing-
to be
missing-
is the
missing
target
our
to be
climate.
achieved, or is the target to stay below?
like
oh,
to
like
me,
not
like,
in a good
like,
way.
Like, to me,
Yeah.
this means
Yeah.
like
We're gonna blow
we're
through
doing
the-
real great.
So missing-
Yeah, like
We're
we're
doing
doing it.
real great.
Like it's a bad thing to blow through the carbon limit.
Right.
Carbon limits.
But would it be
yeah.
easier just to say missing our?
I think
Yeah,
there-
yeah.
I think there's like a better way to say
Yeah.
it.
Okay. Yeah.
Or just missing
Thank
our
you for
climate.
that. Yeah.
I was like, really?
Yeah. We definitely want it to be readable by everyone. It could be written at a more 8th grade level. I agree. This is mostly foreign language. Came from the website, so I'm not responsible for all of it.
I have a contact at Duke Energy. She's the community relations manager. I don't know if you would want to connect with her.
Definitely.
Okay.
Yeah, for sure.
I don't know.
She's great. I love
Liz. Yeah, Liz is good.
Yeah, that would be fantastic.
Okay. Yeah. This seems quite applicable
Mm-hmm.
too.
Yeah, it would be awesome if we could get endorsements from local businesses as well. Duke or Centerpoint.
Okay. Anything else? I think this is
great.
a good first discussion. Yeah, you could probably revisit before we do more readings and stuff. But I think there's some
Perfect.
good places to go.
Thank you for that.
Next was an addition to the bylaws, but I'm gonna remove that because it's already in the bylaws. What I thought I needed to add. So no resolutions, no new business. So unless anyone has anything else to add, I'm gonna adjourn our meeting. It's 7:20. Our next meeting is June 13th at 6 p.m.